It wasn't a pink slip. It wasn't even a formal meeting. It was a single PDF file, quietly dropped into my inbox at 8:12 a.m. on a Monday morning. Subject: compensation realignment, immediate effect. I sat there, coffee in hand, blinking at the title. The phrase itself felt sterile, like it had been passed through 5 layers of HR filtration to hide the stench of betrayal. But as I opened the document, scanning line by line, my stomach twisted. A 35% pay cut. 14 years of loyalty. 14 years of showing up early, staying late, and picking up the slack for others when they quit or got laid off. 14 years of giving up weekends, vacations, family dinners, and this was my reward. No explanation, no warning, just a realignment. For a few minutes, I sat frozen. The cursor blinked at the edge of the screen, like it was mocking me. It wasn't just about money, it was about what that cut symbolized. It said, "You're disposable. You don't matter. You're lucky we kept you at all." A dull roar started in my ears. Then came the sting of humiliation, swelling into anger so intense it made my hands shake. I thought about every time I said no to friends, skipped birthday parties, stayed up fixing things others had broken. I thought about the late nights in empty office buildings where my only company was the hum of the vending machine. All of it, suddenly invalidated by a faceless PDF. I marched into my manager's office. Rick, the kind of guy who always looked like he was late for a golf game. He barely looked up. "Saw you got the email," he said, like we were discussing a weather update. "Tough call, but it's happening across the board." Across the board? I wasn't born yesterday. 2 of my colleagues, both newer hires, both close with Rick, had gotten raises just 3 months ago. I knew because I processed the payroll changes myself. I clenched my jaw. "So after 14 years, you're telling me I'm worth a third less? Based on what, exactly?" Rick gave me that corporate smile, tight-lipped, eyes dead. "It's not personal." That's when it hit me. It was entirely personal. I was a holdover from the old company before the merger. They didn't want to fire me outright. They wanted me to quit. They wanted me to devalue myself so badly that I'd walk out quietly, without severance, without a scene. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I walked back to my desk, heart pounding. I stared at that PDF again, and instead of feeling small, I felt something else rising in me, something hot, fierce, and unshakable. Resolve. They thought I'd roll over. They thought I'd swallow the insult and carry on like a good little soldier. They were wrong. I drafted my resignation, dated it the same day, and sent it within the hour. No dramatic farewell, no begging for reconsideration. Just a simple statement. "I decline the compensation adjustment. Please accept this letter as formal resignation, effective immediately." And then I began to plan. Because if they thought they could erase 14 years of blood, sweat, and loyalty with a single document, I was going to show them what karma really looked like. Walking out of that office should have felt like freedom, like taking back control. But in the cold silence of my apartment that night, reality hit me like a freight train. I was unemployed. No severance, no savings cushion, just rent, bills, and a resume I hadn't updated in 7 years. 14 years in one place had made me complacent, comfortable. I was valuable there, or so I thought. Now I realized that my loyalty had been my biggest weakness. I'd stayed late without demanding overtime. I'd accepted minimal raises because times were tough. I'd volunteered for extra projects, helped train new hires, smoothed over client disasters, and never once asked for more. I had handed them my dedication like a gift, and they used it to wipe their feet. The worst part? I'd seen the signs. The merger 6 months ago, the hushed meetings behind closed doors, the sudden culture shift, where backstabbing was rewarded and silence was expected. I told myself it would pass, that my work would speak for itself. But in corporate politics, hard work is only respected until you become too expensive. Rick had known. Of course he had. That weasel had probably been planning my exit for months. It made perfect sense now. Why he pulled me off high-profile projects. Why he pushed newer, flashier hires into the spotlight. He didn't want a seasoned employee with institutional knowledge and a backbone. He wanted blank slates he could mold and manipulate. My mind reeled with the thought of starting over. I had no idea how much the industry had changed. Job listings were flooded with jargon I barely recognized. Everything was agile, lean, AI adjacent. What the hell did cross-functional synergies even mean? Still, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to crawl back to anyone. I wasn't going to beg Rick for a second chance. I wasn't going to slink away into a lesser role and pretend the betrayal didn't matter. But the consequences were real. That 35% cut may have been offensive, but now I had zero income. I had to face the truth. I'd been set up. They didn't fire me because they couldn't. Not without cause, not without severance. But a strategic devaluation? That was brilliant, in a twisted way. It gave them everything they wanted without any of the legal mess. The problem was deeper than money. It was the erasure of my value, my history, my contribution. I'd built systems that saved that company thousands. I'd mentored dozens of junior employees. I was there through layoffs, office relocations, even a damn flood. And now, it was like I never existed. I could feel the resentment simmering just beneath the surface. But alongside it, something else was forming. Clarity. This wasn't just a company that made a hard financial choice. This was targeted. They'd wanted me out, but not loud. They didn't want the blowback of firing a long-term employee with a clean record. So they cut me deep enough to walk away on my own. No severance, no unemployment, no legal fuss. And that's when the wheels in my mind started turning. Because if they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they didn't understand the full scope of what they'd lost. I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I was the machine. I knew where the skeletons were buried. I knew which efficiencies were just budget lies dressed up with spreadsheets. I knew which clients were held together with duct tape and promises. And more importantly, I knew how to expose every last bit of it. They wanted to erase me. I was about to make sure my absence was the loudest thing they'd ever heard. At first, I thought I was just angry at being discarded, angry at how easily they'd tried to make me disappear. But as the hours passed and the sting settled into something heavier, I realized it wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger. Because the more I thought about it, the more I saw the pattern. How many times I had watched the same quiet betrayal unfold in front of me. Colleagues forced out with performance plans after decades of service. Older staff reorganized into roles that didn't make sense just to nudge them out. Women passed over for promotions while their ideas were handed off to louder men. People like me, loyal, quiet workhorses, used until they were no longer convenient. And each time we told ourselves it was just business. That's how they keep us quiet. That's how they get away with it. They cloak betrayal in policy, hide exploitation behind buzzwords like streamlining and realignment, and count on people being too scared, too tired, or too proud to fight back. I thought about Maria, fired after taking time off for her husband's cancer treatments. I thought about Jamal, pushed out just after leading the biggest client acquisition of the year, conveniently replaced by Rick's golf buddy. I thought about the single mom who trained 3 new hires while being denied a raise, because the budget was tight, only to find out later those same hires were earning more than she ever did. I'd watched it all. I'd even justified it. I stayed silent, told myself it wasn't my fight. Until now. Now it was personal. They didn't just cut my pay. They tried to rewrite my worth. They wanted to push me out so I'd go quietly, tail between my legs without raising a fuss. They didn't want to risk a wrongful termination lawsuit or spark HR scrutiny. They wanted plausible deniability. They wanted me to blame myself. But I wasn't going to carry their guilt. I had given them 14 years. I had sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, my mental health. I had put my own ambitions on hold because I believed in something bigger: loyalty, stability, growth. And for what? A faceless, gutless document and a manager who wouldn't even make eye contact? They could justify it however they wanted. But I knew what it was: exploitation. Plain and simple. And now I had something they didn't. I had insight. I had receipts, I had nothing left to lose, and most dangerous of all, I had time. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wasn't going to go slashing tires or sending angry emails. That wasn't who I was. But I also wasn't going to let this slide, because if I did, if I walked away and let them pat themselves on the back for another clean exit, they'd just do it again. To the next loyal employee, and the next, until there was no one left but sycophants and manipulators. No, I couldn't let that happen. This mattered because of every person who'd been quietly erased before me. It mattered because corporations, like this, bet on our silence. They think we won't fight back because we're afraid, because we don't want to be labeled difficult or disgruntled. But I wasn't afraid anymore. They had taken the job, but they hadn't taken my voice. They had taken my income, but they hadn't taken my integrity. I was going to speak, loudly, clearly, with evidence. Because if there was one thing this company had taught me over 14 years, it was exactly how the system worked and where its weakest points were. They thought they'd pushed me out, but all they'd done was give me a platform. And now? I was going to burn the whole rotten structure to the ground. By the next morning, my anger had crystallized into something sharper: strategy. I wasn't just going to vent online or write a bitter LinkedIn post. That would be cathartic, sure, but it wouldn't change anything. I wanted consequences, real ones. The kind that showed up on spreadsheets, in boardroom whispers, in sleepless nights for Rick and his cronies. So I made a list. Step 1, gather proof. I still had access to my work email archive, thousands of threads saved over the years. While I'd been locked out of the live system after my resignation, I had backups. I had printed reports, forwarded documents to my personal drive over the years, all legally accessible under the company's old open access policy, and even had screenshots of project dashboards and Slack conversations saved for reference. I didn't know it at the time, but those casual saves were about to become evidence. Step 2, follow the money. During my time as operations lead, I'd handled internal budget sheets, expense reconciliations, and resource allocation reports. I'd noticed discrepancies back then, small, almost invisible to anyone not paying close attention. Executive bonuses hidden in recruitment incentives, client overcharges that were brushed aside because they'd never notice. Team layoffs justified by budget cuts, while leadership approved absurd purchases like branded drone footage for a client presentation. It wasn't illegal, necessarily, but it was unethical, and if it reached the right eyes, like investors or shareholders, it would turn into a PR nightmare. Step 3, weaponize the truth. That's where I had to get creative. I wasn't looking for a lawsuit. I didn't want years in court or to blow my savings on legal fees. I wanted impact, fast. So I reached out to a few key people I had helped over the years, people who'd also been quietly shoved aside. Maria, Jamal, even Greg, a former vendor who had sued the company for breach of contract before quietly settling. We got on a video call. I showed them what I had. There was a moment of silence when I finished. Maria leaned forward. "You know this could destroy Rick, right?" "I'm counting on it," I said. But it wasn't just Rick anymore. It was the entire leadership team who played along, who used compliance as a shield while quietly bleeding employees dry. We'd all been told the same lie: be loyal, and you'll be taken care of. But it had only ever worked one way. That's when I came up with the centerpiece of the plan: an open dossier. A digital file, carefully curated, redacted where necessary, completely legal, but packed with enough internal memos, meeting minutes, and documentation to draw a clear picture of what the company had been doing. Inflated earnings reports, favoritism in promotions, the quiet removal of anyone who pushed back on unethical decisions. I built it like a case file. Every section cross-referenced, every piece of evidence linked to company policies they'd broken or twisted. I made it easy to read, impossible to ignore. Step 4, find the pressure points. I didn't send it to the media, not yet. That was the last resort. First, I wanted to send it where it would really hurt: the investors, the board, the clients. Because here's the thing: corporate leaders don't fear bad behavior. They fear exposure. So I compiled a list of their top 10 clients, the ones they bragged about on every sales deck. I found contact emails, public, listed on press releases or professional sites. I wrote a single, powerful letter. As a former employee with 14 years of service, I feel compelled to share with you the internal practices and ethical violations I witnessed at company name. Please find attached a fully sourced, time-stamped dossier compiled from internal documents and communications. I trust you will review this with the seriousness it deserves. No slander, no rage, just facts. Cold, undeniable facts. And I knew one thing about powerful people: they hate being associated with scandal. Even the whiff of impropriety was enough to make them jump ship. Now the fuse was lit. All I had to do was watch what happened when the truth finally landed in the one place no company could control: public accountability. I didn't expect fireworks. The next day. Corporations like this don't collapse overnight. But 3 days after the dossier went out, I got a message, anonymously, from a friend still inside. Rick's in a closed-door meeting. Everyone's panicking. Something's going down. I smirked. The first tremor had hit. But I wasn't done yet. Now that the truth was out there, I needed to ensure it couldn't be ignored or buried. So I began phase 2. Strategic exposure. If you're ever in a similar position, here's what I learned, what worked, and what absolutely matters when you're up against a corporate giant trying to erase you. Control the narrative before they do. Before they could spin it, I posted a carefully written open letter on my LinkedIn. No names, no slander, just truth. I laid out what had happened to me, the abrupt 35% pay cut, the calculated push-out, and how this reflected a broader culture of exploitation. I attached a summarized version of the dossier, sanitized, public-friendly, just enough to stir curiosity and credibility. The post gained traction, fast. Former employees started commenting, I was pushed out too. This explains so much. I always wondered why the leadership seemed so panicked all the time. Even people still working there liked it, silently, anonymously, because that's how fear works. But behind that silence was solidarity. Make noise where it counts. I sent the full dossier to a few key industry journalists, not tabloids, but respected business reporters known for investigative pieces on corporate malpractice. I didn't expect immediate coverage, but I gave them everything they'd need to start asking uncomfortable questions. Then I reached out to advocacy groups for workplace fairness and whistleblower protection. Some didn't respond, but 2 of them did, and they were very interested. Documentation is your armor. It wasn't just about having proof, it was about having organized, compelling documentation. When fighting powerful entities, your strongest weapon is clarity. I had labeled every file, time-stamped every screenshot, and paired each claim with a supporting policy or law. It made my story airtight. If you're ever going to call out a corporation, don't just be loud, be precise. Don't do it alone. This was never just about me. Jamal, Maria, Greg, we worked together. Jamal drafted a financial analysis of the budget gaps I flagged. Maria compiled timelines showing consistent pay gaps and discriminatory hiring practices. Greg, a legal consultant now, reviewed the whole thing to make sure it stayed on the right side of the law. We weren't a revenge squad. We were a truth-telling task force, and that changed everything. Hit them where it hurts, trust and image. I knew that clients, investors, and partners were the real audience. So I watched the company's social media and investor pages like a hawk. Whenever they posted some generic PR about valuing employees, I responded politely with a link to my post or a simple question. How does this value align with the 35% pay cut imposed on long-term staff without warning? Others followed suit. Soon their comment sections were flooded. And what do companies do when they're under scrutiny? They scramble. Protect yourself. I filed a formal report with the Department of Labor regarding the pay cut. Even if nothing came of it directly, it created a paper trail. I also made sure I wasn't violating any NDA, because companies love to use legal threats as intimidation. But I hadn't stolen documents. I had used what was legally available, to me as part of my role, carefully vetted. And I never once lied. That's important. Don't stoop to their level. Within a week, my post hit over 100,000 views. Recruiters reached out. Reporters started calling. And then quietly, the company's website changed. Rick was no longer with the company. Gone. Just like that. Not a word said publicly, but I knew. We all did. The cover-up had failed. I didn't get a public apology. I didn't expect one. But I got something better, accountability. And the message was clear. To every person like me, pushed out and erased, we see you. We hear you, and we're not staying quiet anymore. I never stepped foot in that office again. But weeks after my resignation, the final confrontation came. Not in a boardroom, not in a courtroom, but in an email, short, terse, from the company's legal department. We are aware of the materials circulating and would appreciate the opportunity to discuss a potential resolution. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Translation: We're panicking. Please stop. By then, the damage was done. The story had legs. 2 reputable news outlets had picked it up, focusing on toxic corporate cultures and exploitative cost-saving tactics disguised as realignments. My name wasn't front and center, but but enough insiders recognized the story to connect the dots. More former employees came forward. One even posted an internal memo dated months before my resignation, where leadership discussed trimming legacy costs without triggering severance liability. My inbox became a flood of messages, thank yous, job offers, people saying they'd finally found the courage to speak up. The company scrambled. PR statements were released. The CEO went on record insisting they were conducting an internal review. But internally, they were bleeding. 3 clients dropped contracts. A board member resigned. And then, almost quietly, Rick disappeared from every trace of their online presence. No farewell post, no press release, just gone. I got the closure I never thought I would, watching the same system that tried to erase me implode under its own hypocrisy. But here's what truly sealed it. What brought the deepest, most personal satisfaction. 2 weeks after that legal email, I ran into Rick. It was at a downtown networking event. I almost didn't recognize him. Thinner, pale, nervous, the confident swagger he used to wear like a badge was gone. He saw me, and for a moment we just stood there. He walked over, clearing his throat. "Heard you've been busy," he said. I smiled. "Just telling the truth, something you always struggled with." He forced a chuckle. "You know, things got complicated after you left. Internal politics." "Not my problem anymore," I said. "But maybe you should have thought about that before signing off on a 35% pay cut like I was some entry-level intern." He opened his mouth, probably to make some half-hearted excuse. But I cut him off. "You didn't just underestimate me, Rick. You disrespected me. You thought you could humiliate me into disappearing." He looked down, jaw tight. I leaned in slightly. "You forgot one thing. I built that company. I knew it better than you ever did, and I knew exactly how to take it apart." Then I walked away. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need an apology from anyone. Because in the end, I'd gotten everything I came for. Truth, justice, and the quiet, devastating impact of being heard. What had started as betrayal had become a reckoning. I landed a new role, better pay, better culture, fully remote, and led by people who valued experience over politics. The CEO personally told me during the interview, "We read your story. That kind of courage is exactly what we need here." For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that grows from reclaiming your power, from refusing to be silenced, from knowing that your value is not determined by who signs your paycheck. So here's my final word to anyone out there who's been pushed aside, undervalued, or written off. You are not disposable. Don't let anyone rewrite your worth to fit their bottom line. If they try to erase you, speak louder. If they try to bury you, grow deeper roots. Because karma isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, surgical, precise. And when it lands, it does so with the weight of every silenced voice finally rising to the surface. They took my job, but I took back my voice. And that, in the end, was worth everything.